Hey everybody, this is Mr. Storm, and in this project we are going to create probably the coolest looking project we've created so far because we're going to be able to start using images in our design. We're going to create an image gallery, basically a gallery of thumbnails that when you click on them, they show the full image. Now, your image gallery can be of any images you want. You can talk about a video game you like, or a movie you like, or some cool art style, or memes. I don't care what your images are. Mine are all going to be images of places that I love to visit. So and one place I've never visited before, but I'm going to be visiting soon, so I'm very excited. So we're going to create a new HTML, CSS, and JavaScript project. I'm going to call mine image gallery teacher. There we go. And I will create the project. Okay, so now we got to do all the house cleaning. Let's get rid of our script and our style. In the next project, we will be dealing with style sheets. So that's going to be something we're going to talk about next week. But for now, we can kind of get rid of those. We don't need them. And then we also want to get rid of the links to the style sheet and the script. Okay, so we're going to do quite a bit of CSS and HTML. But first, let's talk about the images themselves. So I've found 5 pictures. You're going to do double. You're going to do 10. I'm only going to do 5. I found 5 pictures that represent places that I am either visiting this year or have visited this year. And so these are places that I really like. They're all in the United States. I'm not quite ready for international travel yet with COVID still happening. But if you're watching this after COVID is gone, congratulations. But all of my travels within the United States. So I have DC, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, New York City, and Oregon coast. Notice over here, so in Windows, you can actually change your view. And if you click content, it'll show you the dimensions of your image. Notice that all of my images are 670 by 446, except for this image for the Oregon coast. It's 730 by 487. I've left that one alone because I want to show you the process that I go through to edit images so that they're the same aspect ratio, they're the same size. Because in this gallery, we want all of our tiles to kind of be uniform. So here's the easiest way to do it. All right. If you're on a Windows computer, you have a program called Microsoft Paint. It's already installed on the computer. It's a fun little editing tool, but it allows us to make a very quick change to the dimensions here. All we have to do is right click on the image we want to change and select edit. And by default, it should open in Microsoft Paint. Microsoft Paint has an awesome button here called resize. We just click resize. Now we can change the percentage, so shrink it by a certain percentage, but what we want to do is change the actual pixels here. Now we also want to uncheck this maintain aspect ratio button because we don't want the vertical to change when we change the horizontal. And for us, the horizontal is going to be 670 and the vertical is 447. Now, you might be thinking, Mr. Storm, why did you choose those specific values? It's because that was the smallest size, and then we're going to save it here. That was the smallest sized picture of the 5 that I had downloaded, and so I just shrunk all my big pictures down to the smallest picture. So that way that they're all the same, and we're not making images bigger than they're supposed to be, so we're not losing quality. We can shrink down a high quality image to make it smaller and not lose quality, whereas with low quality images or smaller images, if we make them bigger, we're going to lose quality, right? Anyway, so now I have all my images. They're the right size. I'm going to grab all of them and dump them into the files section here in Replit. Okay, so I have the images I need. Let's talk about how we're going to make this happen on the web page. Now we're going to use a special, a new element that we've never used before. It's a very helpful element, especially when we get into pages with a lot of stuff on them. This element is called a div. Now, a div is essentially just a container to hold HTML objects, but we can apply classes and CSS style to those divs specifically so that they do something. Everything inside of that div will have the same style applied to it. So let me show you very quickly how divs work. I'm going to create a div here at the top of my page, and I'm just going to use it as like a header. I'll say H1. Sorry. Places I love to visit. All right. And then I'll do an H2 inside as well, H2. And I'll say, I don't know, a travel blog by Mr. Storm. I want there to be some kind of a header on your page because I don't want you guys just to have a page full of images with no header content. So I'm going to hit run and we'll see what that looks like. And that's exactly what we expect, right? Places I love to visit, a travel blog by Mr. Storm. But this doesn't look great. So we're going to use CSS to make that better. Oh, you know what? Let's change my title up here so that it doesn't keep saying replit. I'm going to change it to travel page. How about that? Okay, now let's create a style section so we can start creating some CSS. Get rid of this white space here. Now I want to create a class, and this class is going to be called header. Actually, you know what? Before that, let's do the body style that we want. So I'm going to create, or I'm going to, oh, hello. Why did that go all the way to that side? All right, there we go. That was weird. So I'm going to create the body code or the body style. And really the only thing I want to do to the body is I want to change the font family. And I'll set it to just a sans serif font. I like sans serif fonts better, so that looks nice. And I could do more. I could probably add a background color if I wanted to, but I'm not worried about that. Let's get into actually creating our class. We'll call it header. And we're going to apply this class to the div itself. So let's say class equals header. That way, any of the code that we type into this header class is now going to be applied to everything inside of this container. All right, so what do we want? First, let's do background color, and let's set it to like a nice light gray. What else? Let's do some padding as well. Padding, we'll say 30 pixels. That feels right. And then let's align our text into the center of our page. Oh, text align, sorry. I was saying the word center as I was typing. And so I typed center instead of align like I was supposed to. Okay, let's go ahead and run it and see if that works the way we want it to. And it does. It makes a nice little header. It's not the greatest looking thing in the world, but it looks pretty nice. I enjoy it. It's a lot better than just the basic text that shows up on the screen. But notice that the div itself, the container, now has a background color that is gray. That's because we applied the class to the container itself and not to the individual pieces. This is the power of using a container or a div. And you'll see whenever we get into creating our thumbnail images down here that the divs are extremely powerful. Let's actually do that now. So I'm going to create a div. I'm going to put some space here so that it's easier to see the difference. I'm going to put a div here, and then inside that div, I'm going to have an anchor element, and I'm going to have an image element. Now, Replit automatically wants to put an end tag on our image, but we don't use end tags for images. So I'm going to get rid of that so that we don't get confused. And then below our image that is also a link, we're going to create another div, and that div is going to be for a description of our of whatever description we want to go below our image. So, and I will make sure I put in the end tag for that. So this right here, this is going to be the basic structure of each of our little thumbnails, okay? So let's do the image first. Let's go ahead and start creating our image. So the first thing we need in an image is src for source, and that source is going to be, let's do la.jpg. We also need an alt attribute, alt. Now remember, an alt is going to be the text that shows up on your page if your image will not display. We'll say Los Angeles. And I'm going to set width and height attributes here, just because instead of using the style, I'm going to use width and height, because this is going to, we're going to set width and height in the CSS up above. And so this is going to work with that well. 400. Okay, now let me shrink this a bit so we can see it all on one line. So that is our image for Los Angeles, our Los Angeles image. Let me go ahead and run that, and we can see what that looks like. And it works. It pulls up our LA image, but it's way too big, and we have nothing in the description, and if we click on it, it doesn't do anything. So let's fix those issues. First, let's fix the anchor element. I'm going to set this to target equals blank, because I want this to open in another page. I don't want it to open up. I don't want it to replace what's on my page. And the href is actually just going to be la.jpg. So let me run that and see if that works. And now notice when I hover over, if I click on it, it opens up a new tab and it shows me my image in its full size. Okay, perfect. So that's what we want to have happen. Now we just need to do the description. So inside this div down here, I can actually just type text directly into a div and it'll treat it like a paragraph element. So I can say, I love to visit LA. Disneyland is awesome. Yeah, I went to Disneyland over winter break and spent a couple days in LA. My dad worked for The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, back when Jay Leno was hosting The Tonight Show. And he lived in LA and he worked on some movies and stuff. And so I got to spend some time in LA when I was a kid. Love it a lot. I love it so much. Okay, so this right here is essentially what we want. The problem is, well, there's quite a few problems. One, the image is way too big, right? I want to make a thumbnail. I don't want it to be this giant image. And my text down here doesn't stand out to me. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to use CSS to make these things, make these changes that we want. So I'm going to go back up to my style section and let's create a new class. This is going to be called a div class and we'll call it gallery. Now the reason why it's a div class, it keeps doing that thing where it's putting the brackets down there. It probably doesn't like the space. Let me just get rid of the space. It's not really that important, but Replit sometimes behaves in weird ways. Anyway, so the reason why I typed div then dot gallery is because I want to create a class, so we use dot gallery, but I want it to only apply to the divs on my page. It's just kind of a cleaner way to do it. Now let's think about some of the things we want. First, I want a margin. Margin will go basically create a little bit of an edge around our thumbnail so that the thumbnails won't be like right on top of each other. It'll give it a little bit of a gap between. I also want a border. We'll make it a 1 pixel border, solid, and we're going to use that same color that we use for our header background. It's a nice light gray, so it's a nice good border color. Float, we're going to say float left. Now this is going to make sure that if our thumbnails if we have too many thumbnails for the width of the page, it'll actually push our thumbnails down to the next line, and then it'll float it all the way to the left side of the page. And we'll set a width and height. The width is going to be 180 pixels. And our height can be something like, I don't know, let's try 230 pixels. Okay. Now, if I were to run this, nothing's going to change. The reason why is because this is a class and I need to assign it to a specific element. For us, we're going to assign it to this top div. class equals gallery. And now if I were to run it, we'll see some changes. So I run. Now here's the problem. The image is still too big for us to see any changes in the gallery here. And let's see, one picture, gallery. Yeah, let's go ahead and fix that image size thing real quick, so that it doesn't keep interfering. I want to get that out of the way. Gallery, and we're gonna say the gallery class that we have, we only want to talk to the images right now, and we're gonna set the images to be width 100%. We want it to be 100% the width of the div that it's inside. Sorry. So we want it to be 100% the width of the container that it's living inside of, which would make it much, much, much smaller because our container is only 180 pixels wide, right? So this is going to make it smaller. And then we will set the height to be auto, which is going to set the height to be the right size that we need. So let's do that. Now we can see that we have our thumbnail works really well. We have a border around our text. Everything looks pretty good. The only problem is when I hover over it, I actually want something to happen other than my cursor to change. I want this border to kind of get a little bit darker. I think that would be nice. So let's actually change the hover quality. Or the hover behavior. So we'll say div gallery hover. I need a colon there. Div gallery hover. Now whatever we put in here is it's gonna happen only when we hover over the image. So we'll say border and 1 pixel solid. Let's make this a darker gray. So 777. All right. Let's try. Nah, I don't want to mess with the background color. The border changing should be enough for us to see that we're hovering over it. So yeah, there we go. Now I was going to play around with maybe changing the background color so that it looked a bit different, but you know, I think this looks fine. Okay, now the last thing we want to do is we want to mess around with the description down here. So I have my div down here that is it's supposed to be the description, but it's all like the text doesn't look really great. It's kind of smushed up against up top here. It's right up against the edge of the div. So we want to add some padding and some other stuff. So I'm going to create a new div class. I'll call it DESC for description. That's not confusing, right? DESC, that should be fine. And then we'll give it some padding, 15 pixels. And we'll say, let's do text align center so that it's in the middle of our container here. And let's apply that description class, that DESC. Oh, class equals, that's what I was doing. Let's apply that class to this down here. Let's run it. Okay, that looks a lot better. And you know what? I might even want to shrink the height of our full container, our div here. Let's try 215 to see if that looks that does look a little nicer. I like that a lot more. Okay. Well, we're basically done. That's all of the CSS code we need. The only thing we have left to do is to just create more of these images. So I will create 5 more. You're going to create 10, but I just want you to see the process. I've just copied this entire div, right? Because everything in here already works. We already like it. It already looks good. And I've pasted it down here. And now all I have to do is change the link in the anchor element. We'll say this one's going to be nyc.jpg. Change the image source, nyc.jpg. Change the alt text, New York City. And change the description. I've never visited NYC, but I'm going there during spring break. If I hit run, we should see another thumbnail pop up with a different image, different description, and all of that. And we do. So I can see I love to visit LA, Disneyland is awesome. And then I also have I've never visited NYC, but I'm going there during spring break. And if I click on it, we get the New York City image. And now I'm looking at the height again. It's probably a little bit too, just because my description was a little bit longer. So I'm going to change my height back to something like 220. And it looks a little better. We can play around with that later if we want. But now that I have that copied, I can just paste in a new one, change this to, where are we going next? Oh, Oregon Coast. Yeah. OC. I visit the Oregon Coast every year as soon as the school year lets out. Like literally the next week, I get in the car and we drive to the Oregon Coast for a week. I love to just hang out on the beach on the Oregon Coast. It's one of my favorite places in the world. Oregon Coast. And I visit the Oregon Coast every year as soon as school gets out. Now that's going to be a long description that might actually run over. No, that's about right. That looks good. And so you can see how easy it is to add these in once we have everything set. Next will be LV, Las Vegas, Las Vegas. I love Las Vegas, but I'm not much of a gambler. All right, now notice that it pushed the Las Vegas thumbnail down to the next line. The reason for that is because we do not need, or we can't fit this image over here. And so it pushed it down. That float property that we used is going to make that happen. But it's perfectly aligned with the ones above it. If we were to resize the page, as soon as there's enough room, it snaps up there to that line above it. So this is a really nice feature of HTML5. Okay, cool. And then let's do the last one. So again, I'm only doing 5 just so you can get the idea. You are going to do 10. And again, I really do not care what you do, what images you choose, or what the theme for your image gallery is. It can be literally anything you want, as long as it's school appropriate, obviously. Washington, D.C. Come on, is my favorite city in America. I love the history. All right. So cheesy, little corny, whatever. Now that looks pretty good. And everything works. I can click on the images and they open up in a separate tab. The captions all look pretty nice. I can spend more time designing this page and doing some different things to it, making it look a little nicer, maybe making the captions a little better. I am going to increase the size one more time. Sorry, I get really picky when it comes to web page design when I'm working on a web page, because I want everything to look perfect, and so I get a little picky. Anyway, yeah, that looks pretty good. That's a pretty good blog website or image gallery website that we put together in under a half an hour. So, work on yours, make yours look really nice. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you next time.